So in the dystopian world of Two Tier Keir Starmer, the authoritarian Prime Minister hosted a terrifying sort of Ministry of Truth style address to the nation in the gardens of Downing Street today about law and order. Yet he failed to mention one word about the utter carnage at the Notting Hill Carnival in Sadiq Khan's lawless London, which saw 50 police officers injured, 8 stabbings with 2 in hospital fighting for their life, including an innocent mother, an acid attack, 12 sex offences, 67 possessions of offensive weapons. You get the drift. Nigel Farage asked, will Keir Starmer condemn the 37 assaults on emergency workers at Notting Hill Carnival? The answer, as I'll show you shortly, was a categorical no. He wasn't even going to bring it up. But what I've found most sick has been the complete compliance of the mainstream media, who have done everything possible to either ignore or justify the horrifying levels of bloodshed, presumably because of the ethnic nature of the event. The most egregious has been Sly News, whose reporting of Notting Hill would be comical if it wasn't so depressing. Watch them decide to treat the violence in the complete opposite manner to which they treated the so-called riots.
A 20-year-old arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and violent disorder. The other 2 people arrested on suspicion of violent disorder. The officers are also injured, says that they gave, police medics gave emergency medical treatment until the arrival of paramedics. The woman was transported to hospital where she remains in critical condition. It says that while the investigation is ongoing, initial inquiries suggest the woman was caught in an altercation between 2 men. So it sounds like the woman was caught up in a fight breaking out. It's not yet clear if these people were known to her. Police are continuing to ask, of course, for any witnesses. Up to 1 million people attend Carnival. Wider context, though, apparently stabbings are now down at Notting Hill Carnival as well.
As Outspoken regular Father Calvin Robinson pointed out, this is awful. Playing down stabbing. She may as well say, sorry, I have to tell you about the stabbing because we still purport to be a news channel, but I would rather not, because I fear it is going to make you all racist. Big picture, guys. Diversity is our strength. And Calvin added, if Carnival was an event with predominantly white working class Britons rather than immigrants, it would be condemned. They would be labelled, quote, far-right thugs, identified, arrested, rushed through the courts and sent to prison. Two Tier Keir would be holding a press conference. And the propaganda on Sly News continued as the day wore on.
This happened on this street, Goulburn Road, in the middle of Carnival, around 6 p.m. on Sunday evening. You know, Carnival, you've got around 1 million people who would have attended that weekend. I was certainly one of them. I was here on the Sunday, and the vibe that I certainly picked up was one that was celebratory and quite cathartic, really, following the racist riots that we've seen in the country over the last few weeks. But what happened here was an indication that not everybody, a very small minority of people, come to Carnival, sometimes with different agendas and for different reasons. And some of those people would have been arrested by the police to investigate, to find out what part they played in this particular incident. The police say that 3 men in their 20s have been arrested on suspicion of violent disorder and of attempted murder. They say that these arrests are a significant step in their investigation. They say that they are the result of a determined effort by detectives who have worked around the clock to identify and locate and arrest these suspects. You may have also picked up that the police had spoken about being tired of having to deal with crime at Carnival, and in this particular year there were 8 stabbings that were recorded over the weekend. But as I stress, that's with a number of 1 million people who would have attended this weekend. And what we know here is that Carnival is an important cultural landmark, one that people celebrate from all over the world. People come to the UK, come to London specifically to celebrate Carnival. So when they're hearing about these kinds of incidents, it's often with a very, very heavy heart indeed. This happened.
Okay, Sly News child. I completely accept the 8 stabbings because this is such an important cultural event and I do not want to accept you having a very good time. The Guardian, they went even further, describing the most violent event sanctioned by authorities as, quote, one big ball of happiness on their front page. But as Peter Lloyd pointed out, the newspaper's police and crime correspondent Vikram Dodd, who has been posting obsessively about the so-called far-right violence, has been completely silent on the carnival carnage. So it seems like different rules apply at Notting Hill, even when it comes to the sexual assault of police officers. Watch.
Carnival in Notting Hill, London.
Yet again, with no opposition coming from the Conservative Party, just nothing, it's been left to Reform UK, now the unofficial opposition, to challenge this madness. Its chairman, Zia Youssef, posted, I encourage everyone to take a moment to read the below and process that they aren't reports from a battle in Kabul, but from a festival the Mayor of London describes as a, quote, way to bring communities together. Orwell would be lost for words. Deputy Leader Richard Tice added, this is not a carnival, but carnage. Utterly indefensible, Starmer and Khan. The far right or the far left, why the hell should taxpayers foot bill for 7,000 police to supervise this madness? £12 million it costs. But when the time came for Starmer's big law and order address in the Downing Street garden, do you think there was one reference to those horrendous, developing, violent statistics from the carnival? Nope, not one word. His ire has been firmly focused on the white working classes who took to the streets furious in the wake of the Southport Massacre.
Nazi salutes at the cenotaph. The cenotaph, the very place we honour those who gave their lives for this country, desecrating their memory under the pretence, and it is a pretence, of legitimate protest. Now they're learning that crime has consequences, that I won't tolerate a breakdown in law and order under any circumstances, and I will not listen to those who exploit grieving families and disrespect local communities. But these riots didn't happen in a vacuum. They exposed the state of our country, revealed a deeply unhealthy society, the cracks in our foundations laid bare, weakened by a decade of division and decline, infected by a spiral of populism which fed off cycles of failure of the last government. Every time they faced a difficult problem, they failed to be honest. They offered the snake oil of populism, which led to more failure, round and round and round, stuck in the rut of the politics of performance.
But it is not snake oil populism to point out Starmer is lying. He does accept a breakdown in law and order if it involves certain communities. The lack of condemnation in that address over Notting Hill is proof of that. We are not stupid. But it wasn't just Notting Hill that he decided not to mention today. Indeed, there was no mention of the epidemic of knife crime, no mention of the illegal invasion of our southern border, no mention of the anti-white graffiti in Birmingham, no mention of uncontrolled mass immigration, no mention of the rapes and other crimes being conducted by migrants here illegally. But this was his vision.
But I also know that we can get through this together, because the riots didn't just betray the sickness, they also revealed the cure, found not in the cynical conflict of populism, but in the coming together of a country. The people who got together the morning after, all around the country, with their brooms, their shovels, their trowels, and cleared up their community. They reminded us who we really are. I felt real pride in those people who cleaned up our streets, rebuilt the walls, repaired the damage.
Starmer doesn't get it. Let me tell him those folk cleaning up the communities are exactly the same people concerned about mass immigration and the damage being caused to our beloved country. There's so many examples of this, but I was really struck over the past 24 hours by a post that Ron made that was replied to by the great Colin Brazier, my friend, ex-Sly News presenter, GB News launch host. And Ron wrote, and I'm sure lots of you can really empathise with this. Ron said, at 66 years old, I look at my country and don't recognise it. Its values and culture have changed so much. I'm not racist, but my country is changing so quickly around me. Am I alone in feeling like this? I wish I could be. I wish it could be as it was before. And Colin Brazier replied, at 66 years old, oh no, that's Ron's tweet. I need to get Colin's reply. Sorry, let me just get Colin's reply here because it was beautiful words of wisdom that I do really want to share, and I will find them. Okay, here's Colin's reply. You are not alone. It has become an article of faith among progressives that failing to welcome irreversible change is a sign of moral or intellectual enfeeblement. These same people champion the primacy of lived experience, just not yours, Ron, or many millions like you. And I thought that was a really great message from Colin. And as you know, I do sometimes like to try and focus on the pockets of hope. We need it, don't we? So I wanted to also share with you a brilliant caller to the left-wing radio station LBC.
50 days under Keir Starmer's Labour regime is like some sinister Orwellian and authoritarian dictatorship. Really does.
Really? Daniel, come on.
I'm being serious,
Okay,
Ali.
tell me why. Tell me why.
I'll tell you why, because we've seen millions of people labelled by him as far-right thugs. We've seen people thrown into prison for, and I quote the police on this, posting inaccurate information on Facebook. And we've seen billions upon billions upon billions of pounds of our taxes given away on overseas climate aid. And that was confirmed by Ed Miliband in the middle of July, that they are going to give £11.6 billion of our taxes to countries like Malaysia, who has a sovereign wealth fund worth $24 billion, whilst at the same time allowing our most vulnerable pensioners potentially to freeze to death in winter. It is despicable.
What do you think he should have done, Daniel, about the riots, if not take a firm hand? I mean, you've got societal tensions building here. He had to send a message, and a firm one, quickly.
Well, he did, Ali, and I know all about riots because in August 2011, with the London riots, I was on the front line as a police officer with a shield and a baton protecting Londoners and protecting Londoners' homes and businesses. But his response was incendiary, inflammatory, divisive, authoritarian, and plain wrong. He should be uniting the country, not dividing us.
Oh, Daniel, absolutely superb. I love it when the MSM is put in their place like that. And you desperately saw Ali Miraj, who's meant to be one of LBC's right-wing presenters, in horror, because Daniel perfectly went against the narrative. I also had a conversation today with the very successful businessman, a man I respect a lot, Duncan Bannatyne, on X, because I think he thought I was being a little bit too negative. So he wrote to me and said, the problem is, Dan, there is nobody to replace Starmer with. The country is in a terrible mess and we have no alternative than to give him a chance to sort it. By the way, Truss was worth. But I hope my response to Duncan sums up why I am presenting this show every day at great risk in the current climate. I said Truss wasn't even given a chance, but that's a whole other argument. But Starmer's solutions, meanwhile, are to destroy free speech, jail dissidents, and demonise the working classes worried about mass immigration. I just can't stand by and watch that happen, I'm afraid. It's not normal, and the MSM is compliant. But to discuss this further, let me introduce today's superstar panel. And it is absolutely brilliant to welcome back Lewis Brackpool. He is, of course, the successful YouTuber and Conservative commentator. And joining Outspoken today for the first time, Tom Bright, who was a candidate for Reform UK at the most recent general election. Great to have you both here. Lewis, can you believe that Starmer went through that entire address about law and order, given what had just happened at the Notting Hill Carnival, and he didn't say a word, not one word. And neither has Sadiq Khan.
I hate to say it, but it was to be expected, unfortunately. These are the sort of times that we're living in. I'd like to remind yourself and the audience as well that Sadiq Khan put on restrictions all the way up to the Euros because he was afraid of disorder. Yet we've kind of seen a very different way of policing and the way of handling various events from different communities, and of course, with the incendiary remarks that Keir Starmer has been making, demonizing concerned parents and various others, putting them in the same bracket as people that attended in disorder. So I'll be honest with you, it was to be expected. And you can see, obviously, the images coming up now of Keir Starmer taking the knee back when Black Lives Matter was out rioting as well in the streets of the UK. So we know where Keir Starmer lies. He's an ex-Trotskyite, so it is to be expected.
Yeah, but he should admit that then. Instead, he says
Yeah.
he will not accept a breakdown in law and order. And we know he will, because he will accept a breakdown in law and order if it happens at the Notting Hill Carnival, and he will accept a breakdown in law and order if it happens during a Black Lives Matter demonstration. Tom Bright, great to have you here for the first time, and thank goodness for your party, Reform UK, because the Conservatives seem to have just disappeared off the face of the earth. And actually, I think the messages that we're getting today from Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, and Zia Youssef is completely where the public is at.
I think obviously Reform UK has had a really kind of successful general election. And I think the reason behind that is because people are just completely fed up with the status quo. And I think Reform UK is only going to get stronger as people become completely disaffected with this Labour government. And as you can see, our 5 MPs there, we currently have in Parliament, we're heading towards 2029. And things are looking really good for Reform UK because people, as I say, are really fed up with the establishment, the status quo, and Keir Starmer is really everyone's worst nightmare. And I think we're seeing government.
Oh, we are seeing that. We absolutely are. Can Nigel Farage be PM, do you think, Tom, in 2029? Is that possible?
I think obviously we're limited by the first past the post electoral system. But when you look at popular vote, I mean, we had millions of votes. We had around 4.5 million votes. So I think anything is possible. And I mean, the current Labour government, if they continue on this trajectory of complete destruction of the country, then I think we could well see Nigel at some point in number 10.
I agree. I think it's possible. I actually do think it's possible. Lewis, the thing is, it's not just the fact that he didn't mention the Notting Hill Carnival. I would actually argue the much more serious omission today from Starmer's address, which, by the way, was so full of doom and gloom. He is the least inspiring person in the world. He's not someone who I believe in any way. But I think the most glaring omission was failing to acknowledge at all that there is any public concern about mass immigration changing the fabric of our country. And given that is now the number one issue for voters, according to recent polling, I think this is where he's going to actually experience his downfall. To just pretend that it's not even part of the conversation, he is so ideological, he is so tone deaf. But this will be the thing that brings him down eventually, won't it?
I agree, totally agree. I mean, this is the most important topic that Britons are crying out for politicians to sort out, not just speak about, but to sort out. And if you have just decades and decades of just ignoring this vital topic, you're going to get people that are going to be angry, to be furious on this issue that's just completely boiled over. And we've all predicted, as well as you, Dan, that Keir Starmer is to be, quite honestly, the most unpopular Prime Minister that we've ever had. And do you know, I completely agree, because he's on the road to this unpopularism. And, you know, I just think it's absolutely sickening. It's a complete betrayal of the British people. It's a complete betrayal of what people want sorted out. It was the number one issue during the general election, yet more people continue to be silenced and ignored. And it's just a complete betrayal.
Yeah, it is. He doesn't even want to have the discussion, which is what I find so absolutely disturbing, actually. I really do. Tom, you've obviously had very strong rhetoric from your chairman, your deputy leader today about the Notting Hill Carnival. Has the time come to just call this whole thing off? It should be banned. I mean, if this was any other event at all in London's calendar, I mean, goodness me, imagine if there was that sort of carnage on St. George's Day, for example, or connected to a football tournament. It would not be allowed. So has the time come to just say the Notting Hill Carnival must be banned?
Exactly. I think we're seeing, obviously, it's more examples of just two-tier policing. I'm not too keen on banning things myself as a libertarian. I don't really kind of take that approach. But what I would say is I think the organisers have to take far more responsibility.
Well, they should pay for the policing, surely, at the very least. Why should we be paying for the policing? £12 million.
Exactly, yeah, around £12 million. I mean, I don't think any British taxpayer really wants to be spending money on policing the Notting Hill Carnival. There are plenty of other things that we could be putting our money to good use, to, you know, solving other areas of NHS or whatever. But yeah, so I wouldn't ban it. However, I think the organisers should have to pay for the policing bill.
Yeah, they should. I mean, yeah. The thing is, Lewis, it's not just two-tier policing anymore, though, is it? It's two-tier reporting. It's a two-tier society. Because look at the rhetoric and the information that was put into the public domain after the so-called riots. The criminals were humiliated. And actually, they weren't even criminals. They were accused. They had their faces plastered all over social media. There were music videos made. There were warnings put out. Now, we haven't seen any of that with the Notting Hill Carnival. We haven't seen any of the perpetrators whatsoever. But first, you know, I promised to talk to you on the show about products that are life-changing. This one's personal, but let me tell you guys, you're going to love it. And ladies, if you are looking for a present to treat your husband or boyfriend, this is a game changer. They will be so grateful to you. That's because men want our grooming routine to be a one and done deal. So the days of using the same trimmer for your face and your nether regions are over, thanks to my friends at Manscaped. They've come up with the ultimate package to keep you trimmed from 12 to 6. Today, let me talk to you about the Beard and Balls bundle, which features the Lawnmower 5.0 and the Beard Hedger. Now, I know when you say lawnmower, this is the type of thing you think of. But actually, I'm talking about a product that provides precision trimming for all areas, even the sensitive zones, that will get you manicured as that freshly cut grass. So I'm talking about a trimmer for the moneymaker, another for the boys downstairs. The trimmer gets it right the first time, being gentle on the skin in all your delicate places. With 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads, you can choose between a precise trim or a smooth finish, and it's waterproof, so you can trim in the shower and not make a mess, which is perfect for those of us who appreciate efficiency. Next, let me tell you about the Beard Hedger. Whether you're going for a neat stubble or a full-on lumberjack look, it will keep you completely covered. There's a titanium-coated steel T-blade, 20 length options. You can achieve any style you want with just a twist of the zoom wheel. And just like the lawnmower, the Beard Hedger is also waterproof, so you can handle your beard grooming in the sink without worrying about water damage. It's got 60 minutes of runtime and LED charge indicator. You'll never be caught mid-trim with a dead battery. This is such a gentle product. I can guarantee you no more cuts. Plus, this will increase your confidence, actually. It really will. That is how good the product is. The really exciting news is today I can offer you 20% off and totally free shipping. I ordered some the other day. It comes very quickly, beautifully packaged. All you have to do is visit www.manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken at the checkout. So once you've put all of your details in, then you use the Outspoken code and 20% comes off just like that. www.manscaped.com. No more juggling multiple tools or dealing with subpar results, just efficient, effective grooming wherever you need it for the premium grooming experience. Trust Manscaped.
Absolutely. It's quite clearly a political motive. Even before the riots, I went as a journalist to the demonstration held in London by Tommy Robinson.
Oh, yes, Uniting the Kingdom.
Yes, Uniting the Kingdom. And I went there as a journalist and as a reporter because I don't trust the mainstream media to, of course, report on these things. And we knew, of course, how the media would report on such an event. And you can see the stark contrast between near enough 90,000 people attending in Trafalgar Square peacefully and just standing, watching a documentary, flying flags. There was music, anything like that, everything there. And you see the contrast between the legacy media calling everyone there, even journalists, far right, just for attending, because they're afraid of, I say afraid, they're concerned about two-tier policing, mass immigration, all of the topics that the country need to address and talk about, and begging politicians to fix, yet they won't. And the contrast between the legacy media reporting on that event to now is just totally stark.
Well, I think that's a really good comparison because, if there had been any trouble at Uniting the Kingdom, any trouble, it would have absolutely dominated the mainstream media. And Sly News, which is putting these young activist children to cover the Notting Hill Carnival, clearly just because they're fans of the event, when it came to the Uniting the Kingdom event, they assigned Martin Brunt, the crime correspondent, to cover it, even though there was no crime. So that absolutely tells you where the mainstream media are completely intellectually dishonest when it comes to covering these events. Thank goodness, though, we have Andrew Lawrence, my favourite new comedian, to bring some levity to proceedings. You're going to love this.
Hey guys, or should I say Wagwan brethren. I've just spent the weekend at the Notting Hill Carnival. I go every year, I just love it. The costumes, the dancing, the music, the knife crime, the open public displays of sexual degradation. There really is something for everyone. Round one corner there'll be a gaggle of white progressive women with braids, queuing up at a jerk chicken van with a food hygiene rating of 2, having their pockets picked. Round the next corner, a crackhead gyrating against a wheelie bin, the sound of calypso in the air. You look at it and you think, this is what cultural enrichment looks like. Did I get stabbed? Yes, of course, but it was just a flesh wound. When you look like this, you've got to expect it. What sort of bank holiday is it if you don't spend 5 hours in A&E waiting for stitches? As the bloke was swiping at me with a zombie knife, I thought about the crimes of my colonial ancestors, and I actually wanted to thank him. I wanted to say, come at me, brah, cut the white guilt out of me.
Goodness me, that was absolutely brilliant. A couple of other things that came out of Slippery Starmer's State of the Nation address today. Firstly, this is not a Prime Minister for all of the country, because you can see with who he chooses to ask questions of him at these press conferences. And yet again, he failed to call on Talk TV or GB News. So Christopher Hope, the political editor of GB News, posted on X that the channel has only been called to ask a question by Sir Keir Starmer once in 5 press conferences since Labour's election win last month. If you look closer, you can spot me with my hand in the air today in the Downing Street garden. And I do think, Lewis, that is indicative, isn't it? Because why would he not even want to take a difficult question? Presumably it's because he knew Christopher Hope might, for example, ask about the carnage at the Notting Hill Carnival.
Of course, he has to protect the narrative, Dan. Of course he must. Without protecting the narrative, then of course his his position will just crumble. His total fabrication of the events transpiring would just completely crumble. So of course he has to keep that narrative alive. But it is despicable. We shouldn't be living in a country where politicians can get away with not circumventing tough questions from journalists. It needs to be done. That's a journalist's point. That's a journalist's role in that event, is to ask the important questions. So
Well,
It
indeed.
doesn't
And
stop.
Tom, you look at the sort of treatment that Nigel Farage gets anytime he puts himself in front of the mainstream media, which is always, he is never afraid to tackle the tough questions from the mainstream media. Yet Starmer today, I thought it was an absolute disgrace, actually, an absolute disgrace. Shame on every one of those Westminster Insider journalists who failed to ask him anything about the violence at the Notting Hill Carnival.
Yeah, I mean, I think his speech was just completely meaningless, to be honest.
Well, yeah.
And it was just one of those. Yet again, we have the lectern and we have the slogan, fixing the foundations. I mean, I don't know what that means, but I think he should have read something like burning the house down, to be honest, because that's what he really is doing to this country. But yeah, I mean, it's just another vacuous speech. And as you say,
it was. And the thing is, especially seeing this as a guy who is completely embroiled in sleaze within just 2 months of his administration. And again, this isn't being picked up by the mainstream media because it's not the sort of scandal that they want to focus on. But Lord Ali, who has, for some reason, been given access or was given full access to Downing Street because he happens to be the biggest personal donor to Slippery Starmer. This goes against all of the morality that Labour claimed they were going to bring into Downing Street. And there was an absolute car crash interview today with the Labour Party chairman, Ellie Reeves. This is the sister of Rachel Reeves. It's quite weird. They don't really look alike, but they speak alike. You're going to get this. But this interview was a complete and utter shambles.
Tell me about Lord Wahid Ali being given a pass to number 10. What was that all about?
As far as I'm aware, he hasn't got a pass now. He had.
Yeah, but he did have one.
I think he had a pass for a few weeks.
And it was a AAA pass as well. He could go wherever he wanted to.
Well, I don't know about that, Kay, but I understand that it was for a period of a few weeks when we first got into government. Lord Ali is a well-respected Labour peer.
Shouldn't have access to Downing Street, though.
Well, as far as I'm aware, he wasn't involved in any policy decisions in Downing Street. It's not unusual for a sort of political figure to have a pass. No, as far as I'm aware, no rules have been broken, and he doesn't have a pass anymore.
Nothing to do with the fact that he personally donated quite a lot of money to Keir Starmer's campaign?
No, I mean, Lord Ali.
What about the £20,000 worth of clothes and glasses he gave him?
Lord Ali is someone who's been a Labour peer for a very long time. He did a great deal of work supporting our general election campaign and had a pass for a very short period of time after we won the election. He wasn't involved in policy decisions.
Lots of other people helped you win the election as well. Did they have a pass too?
I can't comment on individual who's got passes and who hasn't got passes to number 10. And I think.
I mean, Lewis, come on. They're utter hypocrites, aren't they? Also,
Completely.
that's the best they've got.
Well, absolutely. And I'm very surprised that Kay Burley's journalism there. It's not usually that great. So I was very surprised about that. But to me, it just screams, I hate to say it, well, we know it, but, I don't like to use the word a lot, but corruption, pure corruption and pure nepotism as well. I don't know. It's so blatantly obvious. It's so out in the open, but it's nice to see that it's being pulled up there and actually challenged for once, because you don't see that very often.
No, I mean, you don't, in fairness. And I do think, Tom, that Kay Burley was right to ask those difficult questions. But why were those difficult questions not properly asked of Slippery Starmer today? The only time it came up, he brushed the whole thing off, tried to slam the Conservative Party and moved on. There's such an arrogance to him. He is authoritarian in his approach. He doesn't believe that he actually needs to justify himself, does he, Tom?
No, I don't think he has a moral compass, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think he's always right. Everyone else is wrong. And of course, what we see with the left is, they fully justify their behavior when they clearly are wrong. They think that they're morally right. So, I mean, Keir Starmer is, as Lewis said, far left. So I don't think we could expect anything less from him, to be honest.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.